Hi, I'm Bob Thompson, and today we're going to talk about using 3D design elements into your artwork. This is a two-part series. In the first part, we're going to talk a little bit 3D and 2.5D, as it's sort of known in the industry. In the second part, we're actually going to go into a few programs and show you the difference between the two. So first things first, what is the difference between 3D and 2.5D? Well, 3D is normally what you think of, maybe Pixar animation or any kind of 3D. True, when you think of 3D, it's really what you'd see like in the movies or on commercials where you have an object. It looks like it's in real world space and the camera can rotate around it. And the difference really between that and maybe 2.5D is in After Effects is normally 2.5D. And what that is it's 3D, whereas the camera, you have a camera that can rotate around an object, but the object's 2D. And that kind of gives you the illusion that it's 3D, but in a sense it really isn't true 3D, whereas you can't craft a model, you can't add vertices, you can't add different reflections and sort, and that's all part of the After Effects limitations. And so normally what would happen is if you're doing some advanced and you want a 3D animation, advanced 3D animation, you're going to ship from After Effects over to maybe Cinema 4D or 3D Studio Max or Maya. And that's really the difference between that and After Effects. There's some limitations with After Effects camera. And then you jump into 3D programs like Maya or 3D Max, you really get the full force of what true 3D can be. And that would be, of course, you could add reflections, you can have a high architectural renderer that'll render the lights bouncing off each other and create shadows, or you can create any kind of models, and that's really where the benefit is. So I think before you do any project, you have to decide what element am I going to be using, because if it's strictly uh, just giant squares or somewhat organic model, you could probably get away with just After Effects and creating that illusion. Whereas opposed, if you really wanted some interaction where one object hits another object and the camera's rotating around and you want shadows and reflections, well then you're going to have to go to something like Cinema 4D. So let's start off real quickly. Why is 2.5 really, what is that? Well, in like the 2000, 2001, After Effects came out with the 3D camera and 3D layers. So what that would allow is you could create, let's say, a logo, which is a 2D, something out of Illustrator, it's 2D. You put it into your screen, and then you'd have the camera, and you turn on that 3D camera. And now that camera could actually rotate around that. The camera's rotating in 3D space. You do have the X, Y, and Z vertices there, or the motion, but the logo itself isn't 3D, it's 2D. And so what you, in essence, what you have is a really big diorama. You have the camera as the people of that giant shoebox, and then all the logos, different kinds of effects, they're sort of stacked into like this distance. But everything else in here is 2D except for the camera. And of course, nowadays you do have third-party plugins, say like ZachWorks. They'll actually accept a model and then use the camera, but the limitations there are you can't texturize it, you can't add a real shiny glare to it or reflections on that, and that's where After Effects ends. Now, in contrast, you go to Cinema 4D, for example. That's a pretty popular program because it works really well with After Effects. But there, you have X, Y, and Z vertices. You can start off with a primitive, which is a sphere or a square or a triangle. And from there, each of those points at the vertex, say if it was a square, you'd have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So the 8 vertices. And then you can mold those and make them any kind of object you want. You can turn that into a hand. You can extrude. You can add the textures and then the lighting. And then you can kind of choose what kind of shadows they're going to use. You can have any radiosity. That's really where the true 3D comes in. So that was really a ultra brief introduction between the two, but you're going to get a chance to actually experience and try your hand at each one, and you're going to see the difference. And I think probably most importantly, what you need to take away from it, look for interactions in 3D. 3D now is more than just a 3D model and it looks really nice with the lights and the camera can rotate around it. You want interaction. So if the ball hits the ground, it needs to bounce. If the wind's blowing, the shirt needs to blow in the wind. If it's hair, it needs to wave. And that's really where you get a nice, almost organic feel where it looks real, it looks great, and you almost can really, the audience believes that's really happening, and they're not taken out of it, and that's what you want in any kind of broadcast design. You want it to really feel real. So, all right, so there you go. Next time we're going to look at the software After Effects and Cinema 4D and jump in and see the difference between the two. And when you make your decision for what kind of project you're going to have in the future, you'll be able to kind of pick wisely before you start on this. Thanks. Oh my God, it's like a